Welcome to another episode of the Resi Build podcast, Constructive Conversations. Today I'm joined by David Jones, who's now president of the Institute of Construction Management. Congratulations.
Thank you, Nick.
Since our last podcast in April last year, where we talked about the very topical topic of the BSR. Obviously, a lot has happened during that process. David's joined us again. He's our first returning podcast guest. And we're going to look at what has changed over that last just over a year period since it's been implemented, and also what might be coming up in the years, months and weeks to come. So welcome again, David, and congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And hello, everybody. Yes, it's... didn't we do a podcast a while ago, Nick, when you said, what's changed? And I said... nothing has changed, but everything's changed. But yeah, everything has changed. Everything's in flux at the moment. And, but you know, it's what we should have been doing, but we're doing it differently now. And that's the change. It's about accountability, accreditation, credibility, and all of these things is how to do it. So it's an interesting and exciting time to be in the industry.
I'd love to be sitting here having wound the clock on a year and a few months and be saying that the BSR is working really, really well. We're very confident about the direction. I have a slight gut feel that you might be saying otherwise as well, David. But firstly, starting off with a wide question. Nothing's changed, but everything's changed. So how is that? Are we seeing the business as usual? Are we seeing quite a different way of working now in the industry? What's your thoughts on that more generally, David?
Yeah, this last year or so, 2 years really, it's been quite a traumatic situation. It's changed culture. It's we're at that crossroads, whatever, watershed moment really. Well, we're 8 years now after that sad fire at Grenfell. 8 years is horrendous to think in terms of 8 years, and the industry is still casting around for guidance, you know. And Dame Judith Hackett said a long time ago, don't wait for guidance. You're competent. You know what to do. Just do it. You know, that was 8 years ago. What have we got? Another Hillsborough situation? How many decades has Hillsborough's been going on for a resolve? That's what worrying me.
We have seen, as being on the coal face on some of these projects and so on, we definitely have seen some activity like that. 8 years ago, if you look at the general movement of what's happening in terms of fire safety standards and conscious decision making around the competence and the way key risk details were being approached, I'd say, from my experience, that there are a lot of good companies out there demonstrating brilliant ones, and we don't want to lose sight of the industry as a whole has stepped up its game considerably. But you mentioned the word lead, and sorry, excuse the pun, I'd like to lead on to kind of a separate point here, is that leadership, obviously, we've seen a wide number of people interviewed in the Grenfell in the whole Grenfell inquiry. We've also seen certain publications and videos which open up a lot further set of questions, if you like, but there's also a lot of questions in the industry about the competence of the leadership directionally, particularly from where we were a year and a half ago to where we are now, where there's been a bit of experience with this new gateway process and so on. Just talk about leadership more generally on that. What do we need as an industry right now, David? What is it we need for this to affect?
Well, we've had 8 years now, over 8 years of talking shops, talking about it. We actually now want to stop the talking, and this is my mantra at the moment, and you know, Nick, that we're moving forward on this. What the industry actually needs is something akin to a Marshall Plan, you know, where well, irrespective of your colour, your politics, you've all got to pull together. This industry has got to all pull together to actually pull itself through. So what I would urge leadership here is stop the talking, get on and do the tasking. Identify the issues that need to be tasked to done. Doers. We want doers, not talkers. So this is where the Institute, the network around us that are going in this next short while.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the end of this current year, there will be a task force. But again, it's not going to be easy because those parts of industry that are doing the workaround situation, they will push back. I know this. So let's see.
So we've got, I know you've been doing a lot of work and research. I appreciate you sharing me what you have with, I'm afraid it's research paper, which you're releasing shortly on your website, I believe.
Indeed. And I'll share it with you, Nick. We're an open body.
Yeah. So you made some interesting points, David. And before I just ask you about this document and the research you've been doing around it, what do you think the unintended consequences are of the new regime which is coming?
Yes, it's an interesting question, Nick. It's the question of deregulation almost. Although everyone's worrying about the regulation, the amount of regulation there's actually a move to move regulation so that the duty holders carry more of the responsibility. I don't think that's been grasped too well at the moment. So there has been unintended consequences on cost of skilling and proving competence and training and all.
Timescales?
Yeah. All of this. So it's that sort of area. It's an interesting.
Interesting point you make about the regulator and regulation. Do you think the regulator the BSR is actually treating their approach would be different to what other approaches in perhaps other regulators in a completely unrelated sector might be? And if so, tell us about that.
Yeah, got to think in terms of the regulator now is a totally new kid on the block. Yes, it's come out of the HSE, and of course it's now been moved from from the HSE to the Ministry of Housing, Local Government.
I'll ask you about that a bit later.
Okay, we're going to that. Yes, the regulator has also got to create the niche and the working situation that they've been thrust into on that. And in a way, when you've got statute, if you don't comply with statute, that's a crime because it's a legal absolute. Yeah. So at the point of enactment, there is no halfway.
Yep.
This caused, I'm sure, the regulator a problem because clearly they didn't have the staffing and all of this, and they were building that. But at a point in time, there was a statute there that they had to enforce.
Yeah.
I think that's caused a problem. It may have caused the regulator probably to have to hit the ground running without the necessary staffing. And I gather, well, we know that there's a framework agreement for outsourcing to a number of competent external consultants that around the regulator that are giving the multidisciplinary team professionals to that. But there is a process, and I don't think they realised when they've set this all up that one of the unintended consequences is there's the time. Everyone's complaining about the time. Now it's going up to 40 weeks, isn't it? 40, 50 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the average has been for new builds.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
So it should be less. But of course, a lot of that, I hear some of it through the industry and through the professionals that are part of the multidisciplinary teams, it's taking 2 months to get a sort of a tender on the framework before they get the instruction to actually do the work. So there's a problem there, a time situation. So it doesn't actually start, the multidisciplinary team doesn't actually start working till a couple of months after an application has been made.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because they're not allocating case officers.
Sure.
That's been appointed. That's an interesting consideration. I've not heard that, but that's interesting. And tell us more about the delays, because if you put the context, if you're taking the best part of a year, and we've got some interesting statistics from ResiBuild, which are direct from the BSR, which are very insightful, but also
as part of them were
shocking. Yeah,
excellent. Yes,
but the interesting thing there is, if you're looking at the delays, you've got on one side of the fence, you've got manufacturers talking about how on earth they're going to fund these delays, the impacts on revenue, and the limitations that has on being able to invest in training competency and so on. On the other side of it, you've got, I noticed just last week, there was a headline on one of the industry news magazines, which had said, Hackett had said that the industry is making too much of delays. There's no smoke without a fire, right? There must be more about it. Talk us through those impacts and how that is actually affecting the whole feasibility and the whole workings of the industry.
Yeah, the way the Act is set out, it's front loaded. So this is what's causing a lot of the delays, and every time there's a change, it has to go through the change culture. I've got 1 or 2 ideas that come through here. Now, when we get to the multidisciplinary team approach 2 months down the line, what if the developer could actually have a certification, perhaps not an approval, a certification from similar people that are part of the multidisciplinary team, but front end that, get building control inspectors. There's a lot of freelancers out there. A developer could actually invest in a little bit of money. Okay, there it comes with a bit of money, but of course, if that shortens the period on the other end, it's almost a quid pro quo win-win situation. So you actually present with an application. This is what a building control registered building inspector freelance has done. He's not approved it. This is a report. It'll go part of the.
So that is something which to kind of show your workings concepts, if you like, was something which the BSR have said time and time again about substantiating what has been set out and why that's believed to be compliant. But there would be a large proportion, particularly with the new build applications, a large proportion of those ones which have gone in where people are looking at and saying, I believe I've done all that. I've got my multidisciplinary team. I've pulled together the information, maybe not with a building control inspector, but we've done it in a way that should have been acceptable. And I'm here 40, 50 weeks later without approval. So, but they're likely to be the larger companies and so on generally. There is also, as we know, a huge percentage of the construction industry which is made up of smaller, maybe family companies, sole traders, even some of those, and a whole bunch of SME companies which are maybe much more hand to mouth than a lot of the bigger, longer term thinking companies, which might be sitting there going, we have done what we can to work it out. We've done what we can to be part of a multidisciplinary team. But there's also now fundamentally quite a challenge with the whole concept of me funding me as a business owner of a small company, theoretically, looking at it and going, what am I going to do now when my revenue has been pushed off maybe a year, and by the whole process of Gateway 2 application, obviously, you then have the uncertainty of what happens at Gateway 3, which, by the way, is yet to be defined from a new build residential piece,
We
right?
talked about Gateway 3, didn't we?
Yeah, and what actually happens in reality is a big question still. But what about all those companies and the additional work they're having to put in up front for less money than they probably would have received if they'd done it in the older piece? That's got to be quite a significant effect. And the last thing we want, David, is, as I'm sure you'll agree, is a whole number of smaller companies going out of business and brilliant talent being lost to other industries because of the absence of a pipeline to actually fund the whole and make the whole thing viable, to sustain those delays which are there in Gateway 2. What's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah. Well, you know that when we were at Wembley, I produced that, delivered that paper on funding, a new funding way of almost securing the unsecured creditors, the subbies, you know. And I bleed every time I read a subby's gone down, and you know, even a large one.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop at the large one. You know, behind every failure is a family.
Yeah.
And you know, the food bank is failure, family, food bank. You've got the 3 Fs there, triple F, isn't it? And you've got to look at the bottom line there. So, you've got to secure this whole business, you know, with adequate funding. It's not going to be an easy one, but it's trust, getting the right people at the right time, and
it has to have a balance between that. You know, implementing the safety is absolutely important. We can't have an underground fail. Full stop, underline, capital letters, right? It's not something which we can do. We owe it to the public interest as an industry, more generally. But on the other side of it, we also can't have an industry which is on its knees because of delays through lack of funding or resourcing or leadership or whatever that whatever piece is in there. So there's got to be a role which I'd love to be sitting here in another year and a half's time saying, do you know what, we were wrong about this, David. And that's been sorted pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, what I think, Nick, this is why over this last couple of years, it's been quite an interesting couple of years for me, for the industry, for my institute. The talking has got to stop, and this is why at the end of the year we hope to have this task force up and running. And within the task force, we will look at these issues. You know, how can we front end load the competence on that? So, you know, it may well be that there's a conversation with the regulator to say, look, this is what we think. This is the workshop that needs to happen with Parliament and government and industry to say, look, this is how we think we could do this. You know, this isn't working. What isn't working? Let's look at it a different way. You know, so the industry's there. This is how it's working. So we've got this hiatus, we've got this gateway and these delays. But if we could give the application at that point and say, we've looked at this, these are the gaps on this and things like that, and that goes forward. So that whoever looks at that from the regulator, if they've looked at it, and you talked about if there's still problems with these things. So is anybody putting a schedule of the functional requirements of the building regulations to forget all the other bits and pieces? The functional requirements is what you're required to do. That's the legal absolute. So if you could just make a list of those functional requirements and present those to the Building Safety Regulator and say, look, that's what I'm required to do.
Yeah.
Forget what colour it's painted or what the detail or whatever.
Yeah.
But in broad terms, that's how I've complied with the requirements.
Yeah.
And this is how functionally that project is going to work.
Yeah.
Now, it's almost to that point, what part, we've all seen it, haven't we? What part of no don't you understand? You've actually got to get it to that point, I think, to explain it to the regulator. This is how we've dealt with this. And then you've got to say, these are the people that we've got, that's their competence and their credibility.
So for somebody who might not be absorbed in the detail of these things, David, what we'll talk about here is the green snippets and so on in, for example, Part B, is where you've got functional requirements, you've got regulatory requirements, and the rest there is prescriptive guidance on how you can fulfill that satisfactorily. Now, as we know, there's been some pretty significant gaps in some of those documents. Balconies, for example, only had a section added into Part B in 2022. And so what you're saying is, going back to kind of the whole point of this, if you're taking those simple snippets and functionally demonstrating it, it's quite an interesting approach you set out there, and I appreciate that input.
Let me just give you, just come on there. We were talking about the actual documents and the detail of the documents. I go back to 1994, the introduction of the European Directive 92/57, that was the mobile sites that became CDM eventually. It wasn't called CDM in those days, early days, with there were other names. I'm not going to, but on that. Anyway, one of the points was that it was put out that there's 3 essential documents in CDM. That is the pre-construction information pack, okay, the construction phase plan, and the health and safety file. So I've been a disruptive person all my life. I'm not going to change now. I said, but no, hang on, you've got it wrong. So I said, how have we got it wrong? There's 3 documents there: pre-construction, construction phase plan, and the health and safety file. I said, but hang on, regulation actually requires the client to appoint in writing the principal designer and the principal contractor. So it's 5 bits of paper that's essential.
Yeah.
They said, oh yeah, you've got a good point there. That was in 1994.
Which, funnily enough, I appreciate the difference in actually what the responsibilities are and so on, but that terminology has also been used again in the Building Safety Act. But let me ask about the paper you've been writing and so on. And
I might have to refer to that because it's all new in my thing. That's good research.
So you talk about the quiet policy reset behind a staged delivery.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about that. Yeah, that's an interesting point you make.
Yeah. Well, it's about face saving. It's about embarrassment. Because the reset is nothing new. We're back to this, what's changed? Nothing's changed. It's been there all the time. Everyone's been thinking, we've got to have this total project front-loaded. But no, it's a stage gateway can actually be in 2023, and the procedures, regulations of high-rise buildings. It actually allows, in Regulation 3 on that I think, referring to my paper, that you can have these phased situations. That doesn't mean to say that it's a softening, it's a sloppier way of approaching this. If you're going to go the phasing, each phase has got to have its own gateway 2.
Mm.
So you don't go further than gateway 2 with whatever, but it's being left up to the competent developer, the applicant on the to say, look, this is what we can actually competently prove at this stage, and that we're going to call the stage. Please approve that. These are the other stages that we will be looking at.
Yeah.
They probably need to be listed out and set out as a framework for the project. But there will be hard stops at each point. But if you're competent enough and you can program this while you're doing one stage, you can actually be working on the next stage, possibly with the same people, or the bleed over, bring in the subcontractors on that, and it becomes a management.
Yeah.
I'm hoping this is going to go, because our institute, ICM, is the Institute of Construction Management.
Yeah.
We were formed in 1842. I haven't been with them that long. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying.
Just for clarity, in case you're wondering. But construction management is what it's about. So this is where the task force is coming on. It's exciting. For me, it's personally a very, very exciting time to be in the industry.
So you talk about this, the CLC's, Construction Leadership Council's new guidance they've issued on the stages there. And you talk about the document mentions a quiet policy reset. And obviously the BSR change, when it was announced by the MHCLG, positively identified that there would be a fast track, whatever the definition of that may be, process. You say here, just trying to find the point, about being a significant shift away from previous expectations of full detail at first pass. Do you think that's something which the industry should be seeing as a potentially good way of the actual delays coming down? What's your thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, I do, because it's not a softening of the requirements of competence. It's easing the procedural, the process of project management, basically.
So from a today's point of view, be interested to know what your thoughts on whether kind of that is likely to mean that it will help fast track that piece. But I guess the second part of it is that if there was a more general member of the public, perhaps who lives in a high risk building, who's listening to that might be concerned of saying, hang on, are we going to be walking into another one of these situations? But address those 2 points for us, David.
Walking into
another Grenfell tragedy, of actually lessening it. What you're saying here is about staged efforts. My interpretation for what you put in this document is that doesn't mean it's reducing the requirements, but it's the nature of applying all the detail all in one go.
That's right. It's a procedural situation. Yeah. Right at the other end, on the building regulations side, was like the 24-hour notice. If you wanted to get something, extensions and things like that, you want to get them on site fairly quickly. You gave a 24-hour notice to building control, and you were on site, but you were taking all the liability that you were going to comply on that, and that's been a bit of a nightmare as well. The starting works, but at this stage, it's worth a go for competent developers, contractors, team to actually have that flexibility, procedural flexibility, where they can arrange and competently manage the project in stages. Now, you could actually, if you've got stages and they're not managed properly, you could actually have an unintended consequence of an even further lengthening the period if each of the stages have got gaps between stage before you next, and they're incompetently thrashing around finding people and making it. And
there must still be a sense of relief. So, if particularly smaller companies we talked about earlier, where you've got that, if that gateway application process isn't delaying, for argument's sake, 500 homes are being built in batches of 50, instead of 500 waiting a year to be approved, and then they start off building and the manufacturer's product is in the middle of a build somewhere, you're probably talking a 1.5 year process, where if you're staging it in 50s, that funding gap and the revenue recognition is going to happen quicker than it would have otherwise, isn't it? So there definitely feels like there's some positives from that, which is
there's particularly with, say, large sites. The new government is identifying new land, brownfield and greenbelt stuff and things like that are new. Now, you think about this, that you could have the first package in a situation like that, which would be the foundations, excavations, foundations, setting up the site. That could start fairly quickly, with a well-engineered plant and equipment, all the structural side for foundation engineering all dealt with. Fine. While that's going on, if say, the actual units to go on there are then MMC, modern methods of construction, factory produced things, that can be going on in a different phase. So that the whole thing can then be managed competently to then bring and manage that interface between the factory. That's what the MMC is. A lot of big companies like L&G and all that have gone to the wall, because the model isn't right. So possibly this phase actually gives me hope that there is a model in there somewhere. So this is why I want the task force to actually work this through.
Yeah. So this is really an interesting point, and I think it would be good to see where this goes certainly in the next sort of 18 months or so. You also mentioned about the House of Lords and the inquiry around that. Tell us a little bit like that before we close up with some takeaways, David.
Yes, the Lords are looking at this whole situation. We were looking at. We said that it's not new legislation. The legislation's there. It's just been a procedural situation with the way the regulator has come on. I think they have abandoned that there, and they're going for this little clause, little bit of text in there about phase, but it's still going to be a competent phased approach. And I think the Lords will be looking at that and debating that, and hopefully Parliament will then totally ratify it, and that will be the way forward. So, and then it will be up to competent contractors to actually put that forward. And the work that we've been doing is around the PAS, the 8671, 2 and 3. It's the BS 8671. 8670 rather, of competence.
So, talking on competence and the role of the House of Lords, they have obviously put out a consultation. They've interviewed a number of people, which have been streamed as well. The leadership changes, obviously, and the competence of leadership is something they've really been assessing with the new regulator and new regime. Tell us about your thoughts of the BSR is obviously transitioning over to the MHPLG. There's obviously clear alignment between the people responsible for the regulator now and the people responsible for delivering the 1.5 million homes which were mandated in the manifestos. But tell us about what your thoughts are around that kind of leadership transition. What does that mean for the industry over the next year or so?
Right. For me personally, it means a lot, because in the old days, before the HSE went up to Bootle, they were at Rose Court in the City of London. I used to do quite a bit of pro bono volunteer work with the HSE when they were down there.
Yeah.
A number of times we sat around the tables and working out these things. When they moved it up to Bootle, everything changed. But in a way, although they're coming away from the HSE, the regulator is coming back to London.
Mm.
So from a personal point of view, that's in my patch. So possibly there's an issue that not an issue, an opportunity to actually round the table again. The task force it's all part of this working. So I'm very excited about that.
So you're thinking there might be more collaboration with other parties?
Collaboration is my mantra. We're an open.
But from what I was meaning from a BSR point of view, you think that there might be more collaboration between them and perhaps other parties based in London than where they are?
Oh, indeed.
Interesting.
Indeed.
And what about what were your thoughts on that direction? Do you think it's going to help unlock those resourcing challenges and so on the BSR has and actually improve those numbers?
Yeah, I don't think there is this distance between the BSR and it's a them and us situation.
Yeah.
We found this, didn't we? There were criticisms when the BSR had the conference up in the NEC.
Mm.
There was sort of post-conference criticism that really there wasn't that interrelationship between the actual BSR and the thousands of people that is it thousands? I don't know, what was the attendance at the BSR conference?
I would think so, yeah. I can't remember.
It was big.
Yeah,
it was big. I was there. And I got a lot out of it. I could see some of the criticisms that had been levied, but there were some very good points there anyway. But there has been this divide. So possibly I can see this workshop, the coming together, they will understand what the industry can do. It's no good saying this is what the industry is going to need to do if the industry can't do it.
Yeah.
You're creating tension and impossibilities. So if industry can actually say to the regulator, this is what we can do, this is how we can do it, this is how we think we can get from these stages, will you work with us? And that is what a round table work, a task force, that's the essence of the task force.
So in summary then, looking back at the kind of the time we spent today looking at these topics again, there remains challenges.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously a lot of learning which has passed under the bridge, if you like. There is fundamentally a lot more concern which is outstanding, and from my point of view, I'm interested to see what happens, because we've seen the statistics now published by the BSR. It does show that they've almost doubled the number of applicants approved in new build properties. However, it's still less than new applicants which came in the same time period.
Yeah.
So the problem is still getting worse before it's getting better. But there's cautious optimism, I'd say, more generally from that. I'm interested to see what these phased workings work out. But David, what's your brief takeaway for the audience today?
Well, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that, okay, some are saying it's unachievable, but you've got to have a target to aim for, and that's the 1.5 million homes. If we can aim for that, we may not get it, we may not do it, but let's give it a good try.
Yeah.
Let's all get behind the industry and move it forward. This is the task. This is my message to the industry. Come on, pull together, get competent. If you want to work incompetently, the industry, really, you should leave the industry and leave it to the people that can do it,
Well, David, as always, been interesting and insightful interviewing you. Looking forward, I'd recommend anyone who is interested in knowing more about this topic to have a look at this and the impacts suggested for the gateways and the future of the leadership in the industry. But from us, thank you for joining us today. And David, thank you for your time. And for those listening, if you're not already wondering, the topic will certainly be covered in more detail as we go through with further speakers and looking at the leadership changes which are happening and what the real life coal-face view is for the industry at large. Again, thank you from us, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for all you out there, it's been a pleasure to talk to you as well. Thank you.